I grabbed my shotgun after HOA kicked down my gate. They ran and left their truck. Behind the sound of metal being torn apart at 6 in the morning is something you never forget. It's not like in movies where everything happens in slow motion with dramatic music. It's fast, violent, and wrong. A screech of steel, a crash that shakes the windows, and then voices, angry voices on land that belongs to me. I was in the kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips, when my front gate, the one I welded myself from reclaimed iron and spent 3 weekends perfecting, exploded inward like it had been hit by a freight train. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile, but I barely noticed. I was already moving toward the window. A white Ford F-250 sat in my driveway, engine still running, steam rising from the hood where it had rammed through my gate. The twisted metal lay in the dirt like a wounded animal. 3 men in matching navy blue vests climbed out, and even from 50 feet away, I could read the gold lettering on their backs. Oak Ridge Estates Security. I didn't recognize any of them. Didn't matter. What mattered was the bolt cutters the tall one carried, and the way they were walking toward my workshop like they owned the place. The tall one, crew cut, military bearing gone soft around the middle, pointed at my barn. That's the primary structure. Start there. I stepped onto my porch, barefoot, wearing nothing but old jeans and a flannel shirt I hadn't buttoned. "Gentlemen," I called out, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "You want to tell me what the hell you think you're doing?" They stopped. The tall one turned, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. Hard eyes, the kind that belong to men who enjoy having power over others. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Mr. Mercer, I presume." He didn't wait for confirmation. "This property has been flagged for immediate compliance enforcement under Oak Ridge Estates covenant violation protocols. These structures," he gestured at my workshop, my home, everything I'd built, "were erected without architectural committee approval. We have authorization to remove them." Authorization from who? He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket and held it up like it was a warrant signed by God himself. "The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. This land falls under our jurisdiction as of the 2019 boundary extension. You've been notified multiple times. You've ignored every notice. So now we're here to ensure compliance." I stared at him for a long moment. 30 years investigating insurance fraud taught me one thing above all else. Liars always over-explain. They fill silence with words because silence makes them nervous. This man had just given me a speech when a simple sentence would have sufficed. "That paper," I said slowly, "isn't worth the ink it's printed on. This land has never been part of any HOA. I bought it free and clear, and I've got the deed to prove it." The tall one's smile didn't waver. "Take it up with the board, Mr. Mercer. In the meantime, we have a job to do." He turned his back on me and started walking toward my workshop again. The other 2 followed. One of them was already raising the bolt cutters toward my padlock. That's when I went back inside. My Remington 870 has been with me for 23 years. I bought it the same week I married Margaret, back when we thought we'd have a house in the country someday, maybe raise some chickens, live the quiet life. She used to joke that I loved that shotgun more than her. I'd tell her that was ridiculous. The shotgun couldn't make her famous meatloaf. I grabbed it from the rack by the back door, checked the chamber out of habit, and walked back outside. I didn't rack it dramatically like in the movies. I didn't point it at anyone. I just held it at my side, barreled toward the ground, and walked down the porch steps. "Gentlemen," they turned. All 3 of them froze when they saw what I was carrying. "I'm going to need to see that authorization document," I said calmly. And I mean really see it. Up close, with my reading glasses. The tall one's smile finally cracked. His eyes flicked to the shotgun, then back to my face. "You're threatening us?" "I'm standing on my property, holding my legal firearm, and asking to see documentation before you destroy my buildings." If that feels like a threat to you, maybe you should reconsider what you're doing here." Silence stretched between us. The morning air was cool, and I could hear birds singing somewhere in the oak grove behind the house. Peaceful sounds that didn't match the tension. The tall one reached for his radio. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to call the sheriff. You can explain your behavior to him." "Please do," I said. "I'd love for there to be an official record of this conversation." Something in my tone made him hesitate. He was used to people backing down, used to elderly residents getting scared when men in official-looking vests showed up with tools and paperwork. He hadn't expected this. "We'll be back," he said finally. "With the sheriff." "And a court order?" "I'll be here." He jerked his head at the other two, and they started backing toward the truck. The driver, a heavy-set man with a patchy beard, scrambled into the cab and threw it in reverse. Too fast. The rear wheels hit the drainage ditch at the edge of my driveway, and the whole truck lurched sideways with a grinding crunch. The engine revved, wheels spinning, but the truck wasn't going anywhere. It was stuck good, rear axle buried in mud and gravel. The tall one swore viciously. "Get out and push!" They tried. For about 30 seconds they tried. But 3 men pushing a 2-ton truck out of a 3-foot ditch wasn't happening, especially when all 3 of them kept glancing over their shoulders at me. Finally, the tall one made a decision. "Leave it. We'll send a tow truck." "You're leaving your vehicle on my property?" He didn't answer. All 3 of them started walking, fast, toward the road. The tall one pulled out his phone as he went, already calling someone. I watched them go until they disappeared around the bend. Then I walked over to the truck. The engine was still running, keys in the ignition, and on the passenger seat, a manila folder stuffed with papers. Every instinct told me to grab it, to see what they had, what they were planning. But 30 years of investigation work had taught me something else too. Evidence is worthless if you contaminate it. So I took out my phone, photographed the truck from every angle, documented the position of the folder without touching it, and then I went back inside to make some calls. The land hadn't been mine for long. Not in the scheme of things. 22 months. But it felt like it had been waiting for me my whole life. I found it 3 weeks after Margaret died, when I couldn't spend another night in our house in Austin. Every room held her voice. Every corner had her ghost. The oncologist said 6 months. She gave us 8, fighting until the very end like she always did. But when she was gone, the house that had been our home for 31 years became a mausoleum. My daughter Sarah thought I was having a breakdown. "Dad, you can't just sell everything and move to the middle of nowhere." She meant well. She always does. But she didn't understand that staying in that house was killing me slower than any cancer. I found the listing online. 18 acres in the hill country, about 90 minutes from Austin. Old farm property, abandoned for 15 years after the previous owner died, and the kids couldn't agree on what to do with it. They'd finally given up and listed it for next to nothing. $340,000 for land that should have been worth twice that. I drove out on a Thursday morning, not expecting much. The photos showed overgrown fields, a half-collapsed barn, and a farmhouse that looked like it might fall down if you sneezed at it. But when I turned off the county road onto the long dirt driveway, something happened. The land opened up in front of me like a held breath being released. Rolling hills dotted with live oaks, a creek running through the back portion, and at the top of a gentle rise, the old farmhouse with its wraparound porch facing west. The sunset view from that porch, I knew without being told, would be worth more than any amount of money. I made an offer that afternoon and closed 3 weeks later. The first 6 months were pure labor. I gutted the farmhouse down to the studs and rebuilt it with my own hands. I'd always been handy. Margaret used to say I could fix anything except her cooking. But this was different. This was therapy. Every nail I drove, every board I cut, Every pipe I fitted was a conversation with the ghost of the life I'd lost. The barn became my workshop. I'd dreamed for decades of having space to restore classic cars, and now I finally had it. I reinforced the structure, poured a proper concrete floor, installed a lift, and brought in my tools. The centerpiece of it all was a 1967 Mustang Fastback I'd bought as a shell from a guy in Waco. Same year, same color, same model as the car I'd driven on my first date with Margaret back in 1979. She'd been wearing a yellow sundress that day. I picked her up from her parents' house in that Mustang, nervous as hell, and she'd smiled at me and said, "Nice car. Does it go fast?" "Want to find out?" I'd asked. We'd been together ever since. 42 years until the cancer took her. I was going to restore that Mustang to factory condition. It was going to be perfect, and when it was done, I was going to drive it to her grave and tell her I finally finished something I'd promised her decades ago. That was the plan, anyway. The first letter from Oak Ridge Estates HOA arrived about 3 months after I'd moved in. I remember the exact date, October 14th. I remember because it was Margaret's birthday, and I'd spent the morning at the cemetery. The envelope was creamy white, expensive paper with a gold-embossed logo of an oak tree. Inside, a single page informed me that my property had been incorporated into the Oak Ridge Estates community through a boundary adjustment ordinance filed in 2019, and that as a member of the association, I owed annual dues of $4,200, plus a $1,500 late enrollment fee, since I hadn't registered within the required 30 days of purchase. I read it twice, then tossed it in the trash. The next day, I drove to the Blanco County Courthouse and pulled my property records. The deed was clean, no HOA covenant, no easements beyond a standard utility right-of-way, no encumbrances of any kind. My land was legally described as unincorporated rural acreage, and there was no mention of Oak Ridge Estates anywhere in the chain of title. I wrote a brief response to the HOA, certified mail, return receipt requested. My property is not within your jurisdiction. Please remove me from your records and cease all contact. 2 weeks later, the second letter arrived. This one was less polite. Notice of violation, it began. Property, Mercer, Harold J. Violation, unauthorized construction of non-compliant outbuilding without Architectural Review Committee approval. Fine, $850. Additional penalties will accrue at $50 per day until violation is corrected. The unauthorized outbuilding was my workshop, the barn I'd spent 4 months renovating with my own hands. I didn't respond this time. I just documented everything, photographed the letters, made copies, started a file, old habits from my investigation days. The third letter threatened liens. The fourth threatened legal action. The fifth included a helpful offer to waive all penalties if I agreed to sign a covenant acknowledgement form recognizing HOA authority over my property. I threw that one in the fire. Then the real harassment began. A county building inspector showed up unannounced on a Tuesday morning. Young guy, maybe 25, nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He apologized 3 times before he even told me why he was there. "Sir, we received a complaint about possible code violations. Unpermitted construction, electrical issues, septic concerns." He showed me the complaint form. The complainant's address was listed as Oak Ridge Estates HOA. I walked him through every inch of my property, showed him the permits I'd pulled for the workshop renovation, the licensed electrician's sign-off, the septic inspection I'd passed 6 months earlier. He checked everything, double-checked it, and finally shook his head. "I don't see any violations, Mr. Mercer. I'll file my report." "Let me guess," I said. "This isn't the first time you've been sent out on a complaint from Oak Ridge Estates." He hesitated. Then, in a low voice, Sir, I've been to 11 properties in this area in the past 4 months, all on HOA complaints. None of them had actual violations. And you keep getting sent out anyway. He looked at the ground. I just do my job, sir. After he left, I noticed my mailbox had been knocked over. The post was snapped clean, lying in the ditch like someone had hit it with a car. I set up a trail camera that night, hidden in the oak tree near the road. 3 days later, I had footage of a white F-250 with Oak Ridge Estates security on the door slowing down as it passed my property, then backing up and deliberately ramming my mailbox. I saved the footage, added it to my file. The week after that, I tried to order lumber from the building supply store in town. The owner, a man named Dennis, who'd been friendly enough when I first moved in, wouldn't meet my eyes. Sorry, Mr. Mercer, can't deliver to your address. Why not? He shifted uncomfortably. Your property's been flagged. We have an agreement with the HOA not to service addresses with unresolved compliance issues. Dennis, my property isn't part of any HOA. He shrugged helplessly. I don't make the rules, sir. I just need the business, and Oak Ridge Estates is 60% of my deliveries. I drove 40 miles to the next town and bought my lumber there. Cost me twice as much in time and gas, but I wasn't going to let them starve me out. Then came the lien. I found out about it when my bank called. A pleasant woman with a voice like she was reading from a script informed me that a lien had been filed against my property for $47,000 in unpaid HOA assessments, penalties, and legal fees. The bank was required to notify me that this lien took priority over any future loans or refinancing, and that failure to resolve it could result in foreclosure proceedings. I managed not to shout at her. It wasn't her fault. But when I hung up, my hands were shaking. $47,000 for a property that had never been part of their HOA, for assessments I never agreed to, for penalties on violations that didn't exist. I drove to the courthouse again. This time, I wasn't just pulling records, I was digging. The county clerk was a woman named Martha, late 60s, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck and the air of someone who'd seen every kind of nonsense the world could produce. I told her what was happening, and she listened without interrupting. Let me look into something, she said when I finished. She disappeared into the back room for almost an hour. When she came out, her face was troubled. Mr. Mercer, there's something strange in the system. Your property is showing up as part of Oak Ridge Estates, lot 247, but there's no corresponding deed amendment, no recorded covenant, no legal filing that would authorize that classification. Someone changed the records. She nodded slowly. Someone with access to the county assessor's database. The change was made about 8 months ago, right before you closed on the property. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. They made it look like it had always been that way. Can you prove that? I can show you the metadata timestamps, but proving who did it, that's above my pay grade. She printed everything she could find, the doctored records, the original records from the state database backup, the timestamps showing the alterations. I walked out of that courthouse with a stack of paper that proved what I already knew. I was being systematically targeted, and someone inside the county government was helping them do it. After the incident with the truck, I spent the rest of that day on the phone. First call was to Tom Weston. We'd worked together for almost 15 years at Southwestern Insurance Investigations before he moved to the State Fraud Division. Tom was the kind of guy who could find financial connections between two completely unrelated businesses in about 20 minutes. If something dirty was happening with Oak Ridge Estates, he'd find it. Hal, you old bastard, he said when he picked up. I heard you went full hermit after Margaret passed. How's the country life treating you? Someone just drove a truck through my gate and tried to demolish my workshop. Silence. Then, tell me everything. I gave him the whole story. The letters, The inspections, the lien, the database tampering. The truck still sitting in my driveway with its folder full of documents I hadn't touched. The HOA president's name is Victor Marsh, I said. I've never met him, but his signature is on all the threatening letters. Sit tight, Tom said. I'll call you back. Second call was to my lawyer, Elena Vasquez. She specialized in property disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in court. I'd used her once before, years ago, to recover stolen equipment from a fraud investigation. She'd gotten me everything back, plus punitive damages. Harold, she said when I explained the situation. This is textbook predatory HOA behavior. I've seen it before, but never this aggressive. They're trying to steal your land. That's what I figured. Don't touch anything on that truck. Call the sheriff and report the trespassing, property damage, and attempted destruction. Get everything documented through official channels. And Harold? Yeah. These people aren't playing games. If they're willing to forge county records and ram gates in broad daylight, they're willing to do worse. Be careful. Third call was to the Blanco County Sheriff's Office. I reported the incident, provided my security camera footage, and requested a deputy come out to document everything. The deputy who arrived, a young guy named Rodriguez, took one look at the truck stuck in my ditch and started taking pictures. Sir, you said they were going to demolish your buildings. That's what they said. Under what authority? They claimed HOA jurisdiction, showed me some paper but wouldn't let me inspect it. Rodriguez frowned. I know Oak Ridge Estates. Had a few calls out there over the years, but this property... He looked around, then pulled out his tablet and checked something. You're right, you're not in the HOA district. Not even close. Someone doctored the county records to make it look like I am. His eyebrows went up. That's a serious accusation. I've got documentation. Would you like to see it? I showed him everything. Martha's printouts, the metadata timestamps, the original versus altered records. He photographed all of it. Mr. Mercer, I'm going to have to call this in. This might be above my level. Call whoever you need to call. I want this on the record. He made several phone calls, stepping away from me to talk privately. When he came back, his expression had changed. Someone from the detective division is going to reach out to you. Apparently, you're not the first person to complain about Oak Ridge Estates. I didn't think I would be. Tom called me back that evening, just as the sun was setting and the tow truck was finally hauling the HOA's F-250 out of my ditch. The deputies had impounded it as evidence. Hal, you stepped in something deep. Talk to me. Oak Ridge Estates HOA is basically a front. The nominal board members are all puppets. Real control traces back to a company called Trident Development, LLC. The CEO is a guy named Keith Bradshaw, real estate developer, been in business about 15 years, mostly strip malls and commercial properties. And the connection to the HOA? Victor Marsh, your HOA president, he's Bradshaw's brother-in-law. Trident pays Marsh a consulting fee of about $8,000 a month, has for the past 4 years. In exchange, Marsh runs the HOA like a land acquisition arm of the development company. So Bradshaw is the money, Marsh is the muscle. Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Trident has acquired 7 properties in and around Oak Ridge Estates in the past 3 years. All of them sold under duress. How much duress? One elderly widow lost her home to foreclosure after the HOA filed $89,000 in liens. A retired couple sold for 40 cents on the dollar after their property was condemned for safety violations. Violations that magically disappeared once Trident bought the place. A Vietnam vet in his 70s signed over his deed after his barn burned down under suspicious circumstances. I felt cold. They burned down barns. Allegedly. Fire department ruled it accidental. But the guy swears he saw someone on his property that night. Week later, he sold to Trident for pennies. What's their angle? Why do they want these specific properties? I'm still digging, but there's something in the Planning Commission records about a major commercial development. Bradshaw's been buying options on land in the area for years, assembling parcels for something big. How big? Try $40 million, a mixed-use development, retail, offices, maybe some residential. But Hal, here's the thing. Your property is right in the middle of what they're trying to build. According to the preliminary development plans I found, your 18 acres are the critical connector between two larger parcels. Without your land, they can't build access roads to the rest of the project. So they need me to sell. They need you to sell or they lose everything. The development they're planning falls apart completely if they can't get your property. And based on the timeline I'm seeing, they're running out of time. There's some kind of deadline coming up. I stood on my porch, watching the tow truck's taillights disappear down my driveway. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes were starting to howl. Tom, keep digging. I need everything you can find on Marsh, Bradshaw, Trident, all of it, and find out who in the county government has been taking money from these people. You think someone's been bribed? Someone altered official records to steal my land. That doesn't happen without inside help. I'll find them, Tom said. Watch your back, Hal. I slept with a shotgun that night, propped against my nightstand where I could reach it without thinking. The detective who contacted me the next day was named Rosa Delgado. She showed up at my door around noon, badge clipped to her belt, wearing jeans and a windbreaker. Latina, early 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Mr. Mercer, I'm Detective Delgado, Blanco County Sheriff's Office. You have time to talk? Come on in. I made coffee while she looked around my living room. She studied the photos on the mantel. Margaret and me on our wedding day. Sarah's graduation, the three of us at Big Bend the summer before Margaret got sick. Your wife? She asked. 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. I handed her a mug. You said you've had other complaints about Oak Ridge Estates. She nodded, settling into the chair across from me. Mr. Mercer, I've been investigating HOA-related complaints in this area for 14 months. Unofficial, mostly. My captain thinks it's a waste of resources, says it's all civil matters. But I've got a file full of people who've lost their homes, their savings, their peace of mind. All connected to that HOA. How many people? Documented complaints? 11. But I think the real number is higher. A lot of people just give up and move away. They don't want to fight. And the ones who do fight? She met my eyes. You're the first one who's fought back and actually seems to know what he's doing. The others, they were scared, Mr. Mercer. Elderly folks, mostly. People without resources, without connections, easy targets. Tell me about them. She opened a folder she'd brought with her. Martha Hendricks, 82 years old, lost her home of 40 years after the HOA filed liens for $89,000 in unpaid assessments. She'd never received a single bill, never been notified of any violations. By the time she realized what was happening, they'd already started foreclosure. Where is she now? Living with her daughter in Houston, her property sold at auction. Guess who bought it? Trident Development. Delgado's eyebrows rose. You've been doing your homework. I have a friend in the state fraud division. He's been digging. Good. Because I've been hitting walls everywhere I turn. The county won't investigate. The DA says there's not enough evidence for criminal charges, and the victims are too scared or too beaten down to pursue civil action. What about the fire? The Vietnam vet whose barn burned. She pulled out another page. Walter Briggs, 73 years old, Purple Heart recipient. His barn burned down 6 weeks after he refused to sell. Fire marshal ruled it an electrical fault. I talked to Walter. He said his wiring had been inspected and approved just 2 months before. He also said he saw a vehicle on his property the night of the fire. White truck, dark lettering on the door. Let me guess. Oak Ridge Estates Security. He couldn't confirm it. It was dark, and the truck was about 200 yards out. But he's sure it was there. And he's sure someone set that fire. I set down my coffee. Detective, yesterday 3 men drove through my gate, announced they were going to demolish my buildings, and then fled when I confronted them. They left their truck behind with documents inside. Documents I haven't touched because I wanted them processed as evidence. I know. I reviewed Deputy Rodriguez's report this morning. That's why I'm here. She leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, I think we can help each other. You've got resources and skills I don't have access to, and I've got information and official authority you don't have. Together, we might actually be able to bring these people down. What do you need from me? Everything. Your documentation, your timeline, whatever your friend at the state is finding. And I need you to be careful. These people have already crossed the line into criminal activity. If they find out we're building a case, they might decide you're too much trouble to deal with the legal way. I thought about the Vietnam vet's barn, about Martha Hendricks losing her home of 40 years, about Margaret's Mustang sitting in my workshop, waiting for me to finish a promise I'd made decades ago. They already tried to intimidate me, I said. It didn't work. Mr. Mercer, Hal, intimidation is just the first step. When that fails, they escalate. You need to be ready for that. I've been ready my whole life, Detective. I spent 30 years investigating fraud. I've dealt with people who'd kill for a lot less than $40 million. Delgado stood up, tucking her folder under her arm. Then let's get to work. I'll have the documents from the truck analyzed and transcribed. In the meantime, keep documenting everything, and if anything happens, anything at all, call me directly. She handed me her card. I looked at it for a moment, then tucked it into my pocket. Detective, why are you doing this? Your captain thinks it's a waste of time. The DA won't prosecute. What's in it for you? She paused at the door, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. I saw something raw underneath. Martha Hendricks reminded me of my grandmother, she said quietly. Same age, same sweetness, same way of making everyone around her feel welcome. When I talked to her in that tiny apartment in Houston, surrounded by boxes because she couldn't afford to unpack everything, she cried, Mr. Mercer. She cried and asked me why this happened to her, why someone would take her home. She straightened her shoulders. I couldn't answer her, but I can do something about it. That's why I'm doing this. After she left, I stood on my porch for a long time, watching the wind move through the live oaks. The sun was warm, the sky was that perfect shade of Texas blue, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the creek running over rocks. This land had given me peace when I needed it most. It had given me purpose after Margaret died. It had given me something to build, something to protect, something to fight for. I wasn't going to let anyone take it. The analysis of the documents from the truck took 3 days. When Delgado called me with the results, her voice was tight with controlled excitement. Hal, you need to see this. Can I come out? Can I come out? She arrived within the hour, carrying a thick folder and a laptop. We sat at my kitchen table, and she spread out photocopies of everything they'd found. First, the folder on the passenger seat. It was a property acquisition file. Your property. They had satellite photos, plat maps, building layouts, everything. They knew exactly what they were targeting. She pulled out a map with my 18 acres outlined in red. Surrounding properties were marked in different colors. Green for acquired, yellow for in progress, orange for resistant. I'm guessing I'm orange, I said. You were red, actually. There was a special notation. She showed me a sticky note that had been attached to the map. Critical timeline. Mercer must be resolved before August 1st. Per KB, no further extensions possible. KB. Keith Bradshaw. That's what we're thinking. August 1st is 6 weeks away. Whatever deal they're trying to close, they need my land by then, or it falls apart. The next document was a letter from Meridian Commercial Group to Keith Bradshaw at Trident Development. Dear Mr. Bradshaw, as discussed, our purchase option on the Phase 2 development parcels expires August 1st of this year. The option cannot be extended without unanimous board approval, which will not be forthcoming given current market conditions. If the Mercer property is not acquired by this date, the entire project will be terminated and all option fees will be forfeited. Total exposure: $4.2 million. $4.2 million, I said softly. That's how much they've already invested. And that's what they stand to lose if they can't get your land. It explains why they've gotten so aggressive. Bradshaw's the money man. He's got millions on the line. Marsh is running the operation on the ground. But it was the last document that made everything click into place. A list, handwritten, on Oak Ridge Estate's letterhead. It was titled Compliance Enforcement Progression, Mercer Property, and contained a series of items with check boxes. Phase 1, Administrative Pressure check mark. Initial Assessment Notices, check mark. Violation Letters, Structure, Landscaping, Noise, check mark. Fine Escalation, Lien Filing. Phase 2, Infrastructure, Denial County Inspector, Complaints Vendor, Blacklist Coordination, Service, Disruption Attempts, Utility Intervention, Pending Contact Confirmation. Phase 3, Direct Action, Security, Presence, Entourage, Intimidation, Visits Property Marker Removal, Structure Clearance, in progress. Phase 4, Final Resolution, Forced Sale, Bosch Foreclosure, Property Acquisition, Integration into Development Footprint. They had a playbook, Delgado said. Step-by-step instructions for stealing your land. I stared at the list, at all those checked boxes, at all the ways they'd tried to break me. And I noticed something else. This handwriting. It's not the same as the signature on the HOA letters. Delgado nodded. We noticed that too. The HOA correspondence is signed by Victor Marsh, but this list was written by someone else. Someone who knows the inside of the operation. Someone who might be persuaded to talk if we can identify them. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the handwriting, then texted it to Tom. Let's see if my friend can match it to anyone. Tom called back 2 hours later. Hal, I found your mystery writer, and you're going to love this. Who? Daniel Pruitt, Deputy County Assessor. His handwriting is on file from a fraud investigation 8 years ago. Different county, but same state database. He was accused of taking bribes to alter property valuations, but the case was dropped for lack of evidence. And now he's in Blanco County. Moved there about 4 years ago, right around the time Oak Ridge Estate started expanding. He's their inside man. He's the one who altered my records. That's my guess. But Hal, there's more. I've been tracking financial flows connected to Trident Development. Every quarter, there's a consulting fee paid to a company called Prairie Assessments LLC. Want to guess who owns Prairie Assessments? Pruitt. Daniel Pruitt's wife, actually, but same difference. Over the past 3 years, Trident has paid Prairie Assessments $142,000 in fees. For a company that has no employees, no office, and no other clients. That's our bribery trail. That's half of it. The other half is going to be harder to prove. We need to show that Pruitt actually altered the records in exchange for those payments. Right now, it's circumstantial. I thanked Tom and hung up, then turned to Delgado. Detective, I think we need to have a conversation with Daniel Pruitt. Officially, I can't interrogate a county employee without approval from my captain, who won't give it. And unofficially, she smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. Unofficially, I know where he drinks after work. The operation to flip Pruitt took less than a week. Delgado approached him at a bar in Dripping Springs. Casual conversation that turned pointed when she mentioned the words federal investigation and wire fraud. Tom had prepared a summary of the financial evidence. Not enough to convict, but enough to scare someone who knew exactly what they'd done. Pruitt folded like a cheap suit. Within 48 hours, we had a signed statement detailing everything. How Keith Bradshaw had approached him 4 years ago with an offer too good to refuse. How Victor Marsh had coordinated the day-to-day operations. How Pruitt had been altering property records to bring independent landowners under HOA jurisdiction without their knowledge. How he'd created fake filing timestamps to make the changes appear legitimate. How he'd been paid $18,000 per property, plus quarterly retainers, for his services. "I never thought anyone would get hurt," he whined when Delgado recorded his confession. Bradshaw said it was just paperwork, just helping the development go smoother. Marsh handled the enforcement side. "I didn't know about the rough stuff." "The rough stuff," Delgado said flatly. "You mean the harassment, the intimidation, the fires?" Pruitt's face went white. "I didn't know about any fires. I swear. That's Murphy. Murphy Jennings. He runs the security team. He's the one who makes things happen." "The fire at Walter Briggs' property?" Pruitt nodded miserably. "Murphy bragged about it at Marsh's Christmas party. Said the old man almost caught him, but he got away clean. Bradshaw told him to be more careful next time." "Next time?" They were planning something for Mercer's place. Something bigger. Bradshaw was getting desperate. The Meridian deadline was coming up. He said if Mercer wouldn't sell, they'd have to remove the obstacle permanently. I felt ice water run down my spine. "Remove how?" Pruitt shrugged. He didn't say exactly, but Murphy was excited about it. That man, he enjoys his work too much. We had enough. Delgado took the statement to her captain, along with the documents from the truck, the financial records Tom had compiled, and Pruitt's confession. For the first time, he listened. By the end of the week, the sheriff's office had opened an official investigation, and the DA was preparing charges. But I knew we weren't done. Marsh and Bradshaw didn't know they'd been compromised yet. They were still out there, still planning whatever permanent removal they had in mind. And I wasn't going to wait around to find out what that meant. It was time to set a trap. The plan was simple, because the best plans always are. I would make myself appear vulnerable. I'd leave town, my truck parked at a motel 50 miles away, visible to anyone who might be watching. I'd make sure the neighbor who reported to the HOA, yes, I'd figured out who that was, saw me loading suitcases into my truck and heard me mention visiting my daughter in Austin. Then I'd come back on foot through the wooded acreage behind my property and wait. Delgado wasn't happy about it. "Hal, this is dangerous." "If they come to do something serious, you could get hurt. If they come to do something serious, I'd rather face it on my terms than wake up to my house on fire with me inside it." She couldn't argue with that logic. We spent 3 days preparing. I installed additional cameras, thermal imaging, night vision, wide-angle coverage of every approach. All of it fed to a cloud server in real time, with copies automatically sent to Delgado's secure email. I reinforced the locks on my workshop, not because I thought they'd stop anyone, but because the sound of someone breaking them would give me warning. I also made a few modifications to the property that weren't strictly legal, but weren't strictly illegal either. Trip wires connected to floodlights, pressure sensors under the gravel driveway. A nice big patch of prickly pear cactus that I'd been meaning to clear from the north side of the barn. I decided to leave it exactly where it was. Then I packed my truck, made a show of leaving, and disappeared into the woods. The wait was the hardest part. I set up in a hunting blind I'd built in the oak grove. Good sight lines to the house and workshop, decent cover from anyone approaching. I'd water, energy bars, my phone, and my Remington. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, nothing happened. By the third night, I was starting to wonder if they'd gotten spooked somehow. Then, at 2:47 a.m., the driveway sensor tripped. I watched through binoculars as 3 vehicles rolled up my drive, headlights off. The first was a pickup truck. The second was an SUV. The third, my stomach dropped, was a flatbed trailer carrying a small bulldozer. They weren't here to intimidate me. They weren't here to threaten me. They were here to erase me. I counted heads as they climbed out. 6 men total. Murphy Jennings was there. I recognized his bulk from the day they'd rammed my gate. He was the tall one with the crew cut, the one who'd given me that speech about compliance enforcement. 2 of the others looked like hired muscle, and the 4th person out of the SUV, Victor Marsh. I recognized him from the photos Tom had sent, thin, silver-haired, wearing pressed slacks even at 3 in the morning. But it was the 5th person that surprised me. Another man, younger than Marsh, expensive suit, the confident posture of someone used to giving orders, Keith Bradshaw himself. The money man had come to see the job done personally. Bradshaw stood in my driveway, hands on his hips, surveying my property with the satisfied air of a man who's already won. "All right," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Murphy, get the dozer unloaded. Workshop first, then the house. I want this place leveled by sunrise." "What about his stuff inside?" one of the men asked. Marsh answered, "Burn it. Make it look like vagrant activity. Homeless people camping in an abandoned property. Fire got out of control. Happens all the time out here. My workshop, the Mustang. Margaret's project. I'd known, intellectually, that they might try to destroy everything, but hearing Marsh say it so casually, like he was ordering a pizza, made something fundamental shift inside me. The careful, methodical investigator stepped back, and something older and colder took his place. They started unloading the bulldozer. Murphy climbed up to drive it, laughing at something one of the others said. 2 men headed toward the house with red plastic gas cans. That's when I stepped out of the tree line. I had the shotgun raised, pointed directly at Murphy and the bulldozer cab. He saw me first. His face went white in the moonlight. "Evening, gentlemen." Everyone froze. Bradshaw spun around so fast he nearly fell. The men with gas cans stopped mid-stride. "Mercer?" Marsh's voice cracked. "You're supposed to be in Austin." Funny thing about that. I decided to stay home. Murphy made his move. He launched himself off the bulldozer, a surprising amount of speed for a man his size, and charged directly at me. In the moonlight, I could see his face twisted with rage. The face of a man who'd burned barns, intimidated elderly widows, and enjoyed every second of it. I didn't shoot him. I wanted to, God knows I wanted to. But 30 years of working within the law doesn't disappear just because you're angry. Instead, I did something I learned 40 years ago in Army basic training. I sidestepped, let his momentum carry him past me, and swept his leading leg with my boot. He stumbled, arms windmilling, and I swung the stock of the shotgun in a tight arc that caught him across the jaw. The sound was like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. Murphy spun, spraying blood and teeth across the gravel. His own momentum did the rest. He staggered sideways, completely off balance, arms flailing for something to grab onto. He found the prickly pear cactus. Murphy crashed directly into the patch I'd strategically left uncleared, face first into 3 feet of densely packed cactus petals. The sound he made wasn't quite human, a high, shrieking wail that echoed across the property like a wounded animal. He thrashed, trying to get up, and only drove more spines deeper into his face, his hands, his chest. Hundreds of tiny needles embedded in his skin. Some of them would work their way deeper before they came out. Some of them would leave scars. All of them would hurt like hell for weeks. "Stay down," I said calmly, "unless you want to roll around in there some more." Murphy went still, whimpering into the cactus, blood and needles covering his ruined face. Two of the hired men started running. They made it about 50 feet before the first police car came roaring up the drive, lights blazing. One of them tripped over my buried pressure sensor and went down hard. A deputy tackled him before he could get up. The other runner made it to the fence line before two more deputies cut him off. I heard the impact, followed by a grunt and the distinctive click of handcuffs. Marsh and Bradshaw hadn't moved. They stood frozen in my driveway, watching their empire collapse around them. Marsh's silver hair was disheveled now, his polo shirt untucked, his pressed slacks streaked with dust. Bradshaw looked like he was having a heart attack. Face red, breathing hard, eyes darting everywhere for an escape that didn't exist. I walked toward them slowly, shotgun held low but ready. With each step, I watched them flinch. The men who'd terrorized this county for years, who'd stolen homes and burned barns and destroyed lives. They were afraid of me. Good. Victor. Keith. I said their names like I was reading from an indictment. "You look unwell." Bradshaw tried first. "Mercer, listen. We can make a deal. I have money, a lot of money. Whatever you want, just name your price. The land. I'll pay triple what it's worth. Cash. Tonight. No questions asked. And what about Martha Hendricks's home? You're going to pay triple for that too." He blinked, confused. "Who?" "The 82-year-old woman you threw out of her house of 40 years. The one living in a tiny apartment in Houston because you stole everything she had." That was just business. It wasn't personal." "What I want," I interrupted, "is for both of you to get on your knees." Marsh's head snapped up. "What?" "Your knees, Victor. You too, Keith. Right now, in the dirt, where you belong." For a moment I thought they might refuse. Bradshaw's pride, that immense, fragile pride of a man who had spent his whole life buying whatever he wanted, flickered in his eyes. But then he looked at the shotgun in my hands, at Murphy bleeding and crying in the cactus patch, at the police cars flooding onto my property, and whatever resistance he had left simply evaporated. Keith Bradshaw, CEO of Trident Development, master of a $40 million fraud scheme, dropped to his knees in my gravel driveway. Victor Marsh followed a moment later, his expensive slacks grinding into the dirt and rocks. "Please," Bradshaw whispered, "don't hurt us." I leaned down until my face was inches from his, close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixing with the sour stink of fear. "I'm not going to hurt you, Keith. That would be illegal. And unlike you, I follow the law." I straightened up and stepped back. "But I want both of you to remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to kneel in the dirt on someone else's property. Remember how helpless you feel right now." I let that sink in before continuing. "Because every person you stole from felt exactly like this. Martha Hendricks, when she lost her home. Walter Briggs, when he watched his barn burn. All those families you pushed out, squeezed dry, discarded like garbage, they all felt this helpless, this small, this worthless." Marsh's shoulders began to shake. Whether from fear or shame or the beginnings of tears, I couldn't tell. Didn't particularly care. Bradshaw started crying openly. Big ugly sobs that shook his whole body. Tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Snot running from his nose. The most powerful man in his little kingdom, reduced to a blubbering mess on his knees. "The difference," I said, "is that they were innocent. You're not. Delgado walked up then, handcuffs gleaming in the police lights. She took one look at the two men kneeling in the dirt, covered in dust and tears and their own humiliation, and a small, satisfied smile crossed her face. Keith Bradshaw, Victor Marsh. She said their names with obvious pleasure. You're both under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, extortion, arson, and criminal harassment. She hauled Bradshaw to his feet first, not gently, and spun him around to cuff his hands behind his back. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise it. Another deputy dealt with Marsh, who had gone completely limp, like a puppet with its strings cut. Bradshaw looked at me over his shoulder as they led him away. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, his expensive suit ruined, his dignity scattered across my driveway. This isn't over, he tried to say, but his voice cracked and broke into another sob. Yes, Keith, I replied. It is. They loaded Murphy into an ambulance. He was still crying, still bleeding, still covered in cactus spines that the EMTs would spend hours removing. His face looked like raw hamburger. He'd need plastic surgery. He'd probably still have scars. I watched them close the ambulance doors and felt nothing but satisfaction. The trials took 8 months. I testified 3 times. Once for the state charges, once for the federal charges, and once for the civil suit that Elena Vasquez filed on behalf of all the victims. The courtroom was packed for the sentencing. Half the county showed up to watch the men who'd terrorized their community finally face consequences. I sat in the front row, wearing the same suit I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. It seemed appropriate somehow. Keith Bradshaw entered first in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost 30 pounds since his arrest. His face had gone gaunt and gray, all traces of his businessman's confidence stripped away. He looked like what he was, a broken man waiting to learn his fate. Victor Marsh came next, shuffling in like an old man, though he was only 53. The months in county jail had aged him 20 years. Murphy Jennings brought up the rear. His face was still a mess of healing scars and pockmarks from the cactus spines. He'd needed 4 surgeries to remove all the needles. The doctors said some of them had worked their way so deep they'd hit bone. He'd never look the same again. Good. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. 14 counts of fraud, conspiracy to commit extortion, criminal harassment, wire fraud, bank fraud, arson. The evidence was overwhelming. Pruitt's testimony, the documents from the truck, the financial records, the recordings from my cameras that night. The defense attorneys tried everything: diminished capacity, business pressure, the claim that their clients had acted without full knowledge of what their subordinates were doing. The jury wasn't buying any of it. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts for all 3 defendants, Bradshaw actually collapsed. Right there in open court, his legs gave out and he had to be helped back into his chair. Marsh sat perfectly still, staring at nothing, like his mind had gone somewhere else, entirely. Murphy just looked at me with pure hatred in his scarred eyes. I stared right back. The judge gave Keith Bradshaw 16 years in federal prison, plus ordered him to pay $2.8 million in restitution. Bradshaw sobbed when he heard the number. Victor Marsh got 14 years and $2.1 million in restitution. He didn't react at all, just sat there like a statue. Murphy Jennings got 9 years for arson, assault, and criminal trespass. When they led him out, his jaw was still wired shut from where I'd hit him with the shotgun stock. He couldn't speak, but his scarred, ruined face said everything. I smiled at him. Waved even, childish maybe, but deeply satisfying. Daniel Pruitt got 4 years and a lifetime ban from public employment. His wife's company was dissolved, and they had to repay every penny they had received from Trident Development. $142,000 that they no longer had, which meant selling their house and both cars. The other members of the HOA board who'd known about the scheme received various sentences ranging from probation to 3 years. The ones who could prove they didn't know, and there were a few, were let go with fines and the permanent stain of association. Oak Ridge Estates HOA was dissolved by court order. The development deal with Meridian Commercial Group collapsed, and both companies went bankrupt. The $40 million project that had driven all of this vanished like morning mist. Martha Hendricks got her settlement. $340,000 plus legal fees. It couldn't give her back her home. That had already been resold to a young family who had nothing to do with the fraud, but it gave her enough to buy a small house near her daughter in Houston. Better than the tiny apartment she'd been living in. She sent me a card afterward. "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't. God bless you." Walter Briggs got $425,000 and rebuilt his barn, bigger and better than the original. He sent me a picture when it was done. Him standing in front of it, purple heart pinned to his chest, American flag flying overhead. "You reminded me what fighting for your land really means," his note said. My settlement was $285,000 after legal fees, enough to rebuild my workshop, strengthen my security systems, and put a little aside for Sarah's kids' college funds. But the money wasn't the point. It was never about the money. The day after the last trial ended, I drove out to the cemetery where Margaret was buried. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind of day she always loved. I sat on the bench beside her headstone and told her everything that had happened. "You would have been proud of me," I said. "I didn't give up. I didn't let them push me around, and I didn't lose my temper and do something stupid even when they gave me every reason to." The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice. "Of course you didn't, Harold. You never do." I smiled and touched the warm stone of her marker. "There's one more thing I need to tell you. The Mustang. They destroyed it. The night they came with a bulldozer, one of them poured gasoline through the workshop window before I could stop him. By the time the fire department arrived, there was nothing left but a frame." I paused, feeling the old grief settle alongside the new. "I'm going to start over. I found another one. A 67 Fastback. Same color, same configuration. It's rough, but I can fix it. That's what I do, right? I fix things." The wind shifted, and I swear I caught a hint of her perfume, that lilac scent she always wore. "I'll finish it this time, Margaret. I promise. And when it's done, I'll drive it here, and we'll take that sunset drive you always wanted, even if it's just me and your memory." I sat there until the sun started to set. Then I drove home. The new gate went up 3 weeks later. I welded it myself, just like the original. But this time I added something. A small metal silhouette of a 1967 Mustang Fastback cut into the center of the design. When the light hit it just right at sunset, it cast a shadow that looked like the car was driving into the horizon. Margaret would have loved it. The restoration of the new Mustang took almost a year. I sourced parts from all over the country. Some original, some reproduction, all perfect. Sarah came down one weekend to help me with the interior work. She wasn't much good with tools, but she handed me things when I asked and kept me company. "Dad," she said as we were fitting the dashboard, "I need to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "When you first moved out here, I thought you were running away, hiding from the grief. I was worried about you. And now?" She looked around the workshop, at the tools on the walls, the lift in the corner, the Mustang taking shape on the floor. Then she looked at me. "Now I think you are running toward something. Toward the life you and Mom always wanted. And I'm glad you found it, even if it took all of this to make you appreciate it." I pulled her into a hug. not caring that I was covered in grease and she was wearing a nice blouse. "Your mother would be proud of you," I said. "She'd be proud of both of us, Dad." The Mustang was finished on a Saturday in October, exactly 2 years after the day they tried to demolish my workshop. I spent the morning going over every detail, checking every bolt, making sure everything was perfect. Then I got behind the wheel, turned the key, and listened to the engine roar to life. It sounded like freedom. It sounded like memory. It sounded like home. I drove the back roads for hours, feeling the wind through the open windows, feeling the power of the machine beneath me. The hills rolled by, dotted with live oaks and cedar, and the sky was that perfect Texas blue that goes on forever. Eventually, I ended up at the cemetery. I parked the Mustang where Margaret could see it, if she could see anything, wherever she was now, and I sat on the bench beside her stone. "I finished it," I told her, "just like I promised." The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I watched it for a long time, thinking about everything we'd been through together, all the years, all the memories, all the love. "I'm going to be okay," I said finally. "The land is safe. Sarah's doing well. The grandkids are growing up fast. And I've got this car, this ridiculous, beautiful car that reminds me of the first day I met you." I stood up and touched her headstone one last time. "Thank you for 42 years. Thank you for believing in me, and thank you for giving me something worth fighting for." I walked back to the Mustang and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred as I pulled out of the cemetery and onto the county road that led home. The sun was setting behind me, and my shadow stretched out long and dark across the asphalt. I thought about everything I'd been through, the harassment, the threats, the fire, the trial. All of it had been designed to break me, to make me give up. Instead, it had made me stronger. I turned onto the dirt road that led to my property and saw my gate in the distance, the Mustang silhouette catching the last of the daylight. Beyond it, my house and workshop stood against the evening sky. My land. My home. My life. They had tried to take it all from me. They had thrown everything they had at an old man who just wanted to be left alone with his grief and his project and his memories. They had failed. Because some things aren't for sale. Some lines can't be crossed. And some men, when you push them hard enough, push back harder than you ever imagined. I pulled through the gate and parked the Mustang in my workshop. The new building was better than the old one. Stronger foundation, better ventilation, room for 2 lifts instead of 1. I'd built it myself, just like everything else on this property. I walked out onto my porch and settled into the rocking chair I'd made from reclaimed barn wood. The crickets were starting to sing, and somewhere in the distance an owl called out across the darkening hills. I thought about Martha Hendricks in her new house near her daughter, about Walter Briggs and his rebuilt barn, about all the other families who'd gotten some measure of justice, some acknowledgement that what had been done to them was wrong. I thought about Keith Bradshaw, crying in the dirt, about Victor Marsh, broken and silent in that courtroom, about Murphy Jennings and his scarred, ruined face, and I thought about Margaret. Always Margaret. "We did it, sweetheart," I said softly to the evening air. "We kept our land." The stars were coming out now, one by one, like old friends showing up for a gathering. The same stars that had watched over this property for 100 years, the same stars that would watch over it for 100 more. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wedding ring I still carried everywhere, held it up so it caught the last light of the fading sun. "I love you," I said. "I always will." Then I put the ring away, settled deeper into my chair, and watched the night settle over my 18 acres of Texas Hill country. My land, my home, my life. Not for sale, not for taking, not ever. A few months later, I got a letter from Martha Hendricks. She'd enclosed a photograph, her standing in front of her new house, a modest little place with a garden out front. She was smiling in that picture. Really smiling, for what she said was the first time since she'd lost her home. "Mr. Mercer," she wrote, "I spent 2 years believing that nobody cared what happened to me, that I was just an old woman who didn't matter. You proved me wrong. You showed me that there are still people in this world who fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Thank you for giving me back my faith in people." I keep that letter in my desk drawer. Some days, when the memories get heavy and I miss Margaret more than I can bear, I take it out and read it again. It reminds me why I fought, why any of it mattered. Because it's not just about land. It's not just about property lines and deeds and acreage. It's about home. It's about legacy. It's about drawing a line in the dirt and saying, "This far, no further." And when someone tries to cross that line, when they come for what's yours with their lawyers and their lies and their bulldozers, you stand your ground, you grab your shotgun, and you remind them that some things are worth fighting for,